I'm Colin McClellan. We got Mike Killalea from IADC. How you doing today, Mike?
Doing good, Colin. How are you?
Good, man. Glad to be here. So today we're going to be talking about drilling while innovating. First, why don't you give us a little bit of background about what you do at IADC and what IADC does as a whole?
Sure, totally. Well, Patrick, Colin, it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. And I want to thank Weatherford for this opportunity. I think we're going to have a lot of fun and maybe put out some thought-provoking and maybe controversial notions here in the next 20 minutes or so. But I've been with IADC a long time, since 1991. Started out as an associate editor with our magazine, now I'm group vice president and publisher, kind of like a last man standing thing. But IADC is a global trade association representing the whole upstream industry with emphasis on the drilling contractor segments. And as an organization, we organize a number of committees that work to provide guidelines and standards for the drilling business. We have a number of chapters around the world. We also hold conferences and committees. We engage in advocacy in Washington and other global capitals. We have a very robust certification and accreditation program to provide training to ensure that safe operations on rigs all around the world. So it's a very strong organization, and we invite you to check out iadc.org. Check out also drillingcontractor.org for our magazine, which I'll plug as the only continuously published magazine since 1944, specifically on well construction.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So we're here today talking about innovating while drilling. What do you consider to be innovation while drilling?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. So first off, total disclaimer here, I am not an expert. Okay, but I have spent about 30 years. That's it. I know it lies. It lies. Don't believe anything comes out of it. No, I've spent like 30 years talking to and trying to understand experts. So so I've had some opportunity to make some observations. So innovating while drilling is a term that we came up with at Drilling Contractor several years ago, and we trademarked it to represent the thought, kind of a takeoff on measurement while drilling, logging while drilling, to capture the essence of new and novel techniques and technologies, primarily downhole, but also on the surface as well when it comes to well construction. So we've not seen a lot of change in this industry in terms of step changes for many years, frankly. And if we were doing this 2-3 years ago, or even 20 years ago, we'd be talking about some new twidget, new pieces of iron. And in fact, we are seeing some pretty impressive new equipment coming out here in terms of rotary steerable systems. Weatherford has a new system that they're talking about, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But what is exciting is the switch towards the digital, towards artificial intelligence, towards digital solutions, big data, that really has the opportunity or the potential to really drive change in our business. There's a huge emphasis on data quality, for instance. At IADC, we have a new producers forum, and one of their key objectives is to work with our contractor members to develop some standard understanding of what we should do in terms of sensor quality, calibration, and other things to make sure that we have the best possible data to drive improvements in automation moving forward and to build really efficiency in our industry. So, this could really revolutionize the adoption of technology, drive a whole new generation and kinds of workers, reshaping the oil field, which has been quite slow, frankly, to adapt to new technologies and new ideas historically.
Yeah, when you say the oil field is slow to adopt new technology and to innovate, a lot of times people will point to the fact that, no, look at what we've done with unconventional resources, with horizontal wells, in the last decade. We've been innovating, but everybody in the oil business, when you talk about new technology, they automatically default to downhole technology or equipment. It's not so much digital technology. And
we like heavy steel. If we're going to innovate, it's going to be something on the heavy steel aspect. And now, like you said, we're getting more into the actual digital and technology that can improve.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, oil and gas is one of the biggest industries in the world, and we only utilize 5% of the data in that sector. And we fall so far behind other industries when it comes to that. So what are some things that you're seeing as far as transforming through digital technology?
Yeah. Well, I think there's some reasons why we've been a little slow to adopt technology. We're somewhat of a siloed industry, or we have been. We've been very reluctant to reach outside to other solutions until recently. And a lot has to do with our industry's rural roots, in my opinion. We were always out until recently, we were pretty much out in the country, out of sight, out of mind. And this allowed us to build these mental silos, like if it ain't from the oil field, it won't work for the oil field. Like we hold these events called Spark Tanks, which kind of a takeoff on the Shark Tanks on TV, whereby we bring in entrepreneurs, guys with new ideas, which are the sparks, and sit them up in front of a panel of experts, drilling contractors and operators, the sharks. And we get all kinds of new ideas. We had one this guy didn't know really anything about the oil field other than what he'd watched on TV on some science program, and he'd come up with I don't want to go into all the details, but a totally out-of-the-box way, a new drill bit design that didn't have to be pulled when the cutters were replaced. And I got to say, these guys, the sharks, have been around a long time. It's the first time I've seen one of these panels literally dumbfounded. I mean, they were just, because nobody had thought of this technique. And also, we have a very fractured business model in our industry. It's not like, you own a Coca-Cola plant or a Ford plant and you can automate because you own everything in there. We've got, the operator, we've got this triangle, the operators at the top, the drilling contractors over here, the technical service companies over here. So we get this push-pull adversarial relationship. Who's going to pay for the innovation? It's a disconnect.
Who's going to pay for the downtime?
Who's going to pay for the downtime?
We actually
It doesn't work. That's right. And we saw that during the first deep drilling boom in 96, 97. A lot of new equipment, a lot of serial number ones, and there was a lot of downtime, a lot of NPD.
We had this conversation yesterday with Weatherford regarding automation on rigs and how there needs to be a standardization among companies to where everything can be compatible. And that's one thing that I think you may have some insight on. Do you see companies starting to kind of have a transformation in their mindset of where they're wanting to collaborate and kind of bring a standardization of technology to streamline processes? Or is it still that mindset of we're siloed, we want to keep everything, in-house, kind of to ourselves? Are you
Standardization is a big issue among equipment. I mean, like there's some companies, major manufacturers, they have 2 or 3 standards right within one company.
Yeah.
Because of the acquisitions and whatnot.
Well, you see the rig makeup of the drilling contractors. Historically, it's been whatever was new and would work. I think now they know they want to have the same setup so they can share parts.
We do, and we're kind of being forced to a lot of that, I think, by going outside our box, our silo, and reaching out to larger companies beyond the oil field. Especially for the digital. Like USB is the USB, right? So so you have to connect on certain ways.
Unless you're Apple.
Yeah, right. One of our you got your own stuff. But we have one of our committees looks at control systems, and a few years ago we gathered a huge list of 50 items of all the different bus systems and connectivity just to connect various systems on rigs, and it wasn't a pretty sight. But I think some of the things that we're doing at IDC and the companies are doing are going to move us towards more standardization, particularly in regard to that.
So are the organizations, IDC, SPE, API, do you have enough weight within the industry to drive that change, or is, like every innovation, does it have to come from the operator? Because they're the ones that usually force everyone's hand.
Well, that's true, but I think the organizations I think they do have that pull, and we have different organizations. See, we're a little siloed too. We've got an IDC Advanced Rig Technology Committee. SPE has a drilling, a drilling systems automation technical society, and they both kind of do the same thing, but a little different. And so we've been talking. In fact, I was talking with a guy, an operator yesterday, and talking about the need to collaborate more closely and drive some of these standards and ideas.
Definitely. And I'm heavily involved in the oil and gas startup space, especially in the software, and it seems that we've seen that in the downturn, this has actually kind of forced the adoption of some new technology. With lower oil prices and ultimately lower profit margins, companies are looking for ways to become more efficient and save money. Is this something that you agree with? Is it something that you're seeing among companies?
Well, that's kind of, I appreciate you. I'm glad you brought that up, Colin. We could have that slide. That'd be good. That's kind of a conventional wisdom that downturns drive a lot of innovation. I think there's some truth in that, but I think it's just we have a lot more downturns than upturns. Right. But, frankly, I kind of doubt it. Do we have that? No, not yet.
But when oil's under $40 a barrel,
there it is, right there.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, this is a slide that shows oil price and patent applications. Okay, for oil field. Doesn't really tell the whole story, but you can see there's a distinct correlation. When oil price is low, so are the patent applications, and high the same way. And I'll use as a case history what's going on here. There are at least three rotary steerable systems being introduced or being, talked about, celebrated at this event. Over the last 10, 15 years, there's only been 2 players really in that sphere. So now we're seeing the development, almost like a renaissance in rotary steerable technology and market. Well, I don't think that's being driven by a downturn. That's being driven by the activity in the Permian Basin, in the unconventionals. So, to say that we have downturns driving a lot of innovations, I just think there's a lot of room for disputing that. But
I think part of the problem during the upturn, when oil is high, day rates are $500,000-$600,000 a day for drill ships. Everybody's throwing something out there, and the companies don't have a problem. All right, we'll pick up this system, we'll pick up this technology, but it's not the best. And, some of them come out half baked and.
Right, it's not always the wisest use of money.
But we've got the money, so let's try it.
Yeah, let's try it now. And it'd be interesting to see. So now, deepwater, this Gulf of Mexico period. I haven't checked the latest, but a few weeks ago, there were like 18 MODUs running in the Gulf of Mexico drilling, mobile offshore drilling units. So back during like 1980, there were roughly 175. Well, there's 18 now. That's the lowest ever. In 1981, there were 24 drilling rigs drilling offshore California, which is not the world's friendliest basin for offshore drilling, right? So when we come back from the downturn offshore, I hope that people will remember, the errors that we made. A couple
Give
years.
us a date. Huh? Give us a date when that's going to end.
Yeah, right. I've got that. Here's my crystal ball. It's always a moving target. We did a survey last couple years at our Advanced Rig Technology conference saying what oil price is it going to take. This is like last year, year before. Will it take for deep water to be moving along at pre-downturn levels? And the median was like 60 to 70, 70 to 80. That was like way up here, and 80 to 90 was way down here, So obviously everybody was wrong because we're in those price bands now, and it still didn't work. So now we did the same question here just a couple weeks ago at our conference in Austin, and now everybody's 80 to 90. So it's like they're praying that 80 to 90 is going to work. But
is it high prices that are needed, or I've always thought that it's stability?
I think
if
that's
it's not high, we just need it to be stable. If it's going to be 70, it's going to be 70. We just don't want the ups and downs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And also, there are some other things that we need to look at in terms of offshore, bringing offshore back, which is lower CapEx prices. Can we do anything about that? If we could, or shorter lead times to production, if we could scale that back, at Red estimates, scale that back every year, that's the equivalent of lowering the break-even price by $10 a barrel. So there are a lot of things, and we talk about it in the magazine too.
Well, and it's not necessarily innovation, but efficiencies. A lot of the operators were talking about in this downturn, their efficiency level went to this percentage. And what I really saw was it was less efficiency and more just, raking the service companies and drilling contractors over the coals, taking that, it was basically a transfer of wealth. They took the money from their service companies, but we're calling it efficiencies.
Right. Well, that's, and that's always the way it works out. And that goes back to the fractured business model. the old saying was, well, I hate to beat up on operators all the time. They're great people mostly, but part of the problem is, you hear one thing from the executive suites, the CEOs who come to events like this and they make presentations and we want to work with our suppliers, but then you've got the people in the field and they've got to struggle with budgets, AFEs, and their butts on the line. So there's a disconnect between the operator's corner office and the guys in the field. And it's problematic. It's our fractured business model. We used to have the saying that the win-win, we want a win-win proposition. Well, and the joke was, that's when both the wins are on the operator's side of the equation, right?
Yeah. So is there a technology that you've seen that's been really slow to gain adoption out in the industry? I know a few off the top of my head. I'd be interested to see if you have any that you've seen that in particular have just been slow to get any traction.
Well, one of the things I've observed for a long time, and I guess you could kind of call it the poster child for slow adoption, is managed pressure drilling. And we have an IDC committee that's just totally devoted to managed pressure and underbalanced operations. I first heard this term in 2003, and the leading evangelist at the time was a gentleman named Don Hannigan. Great guy, and he worked for Weatherford at the time. And he'd come up through Arkansas where they routinely did underbalanced drilling. And MPD was shown to early on to have positive aspects for drilling. The watchwords were you could drill the undrillable, especially in deep water, because of the the narrow, what they called, you have the narrow margin between the pore pressure and the fracture gradient. It was very difficult to stay within that boundary. Too much on one side, you'd have influx into the wellbore. Too much on the other side, you'd fracture the rock. So what people were doing was putting in these many casing strings, you may know, and then by the time you get to the bottom, you got a wellbore about this big, right? So not very good for protect. Little exaggeration. So managed pressure drilling, which is a closed loop system, would allow you to overcome that barrier. But it's 15 years later now, and we're just now beginning to see the technology adopted. We have conference after conference, and now it's starting to be adopted, but there's so little activity offshore that we aren't getting that benefit. It is starting to be used onshore more, and there was always consultants and specialists. So managed pressure drilling, I don't like to say it was an art, but it was very much a scientific endeavor. And now we're starting to see kind of and I don't mean this in a bad way, but the commoditization sort of MPD. And I know Weatherford's worked a long time on MPD and has done a lot to advance that technology. So it's taken a long time to bring this along. And part of it is, the risk of failure in our industry of a catastrophe is huge, just like Macondo. You don't want something to go wrong. And also regulators are reluctant to try anything new, at least in the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, we want to be innovative, but we're also very risk averse, obviously,
That's right.
because of the high level of risk that's involved.
That's right.
But part of MPD is a problem with the adoption and standardization. Because when I was working for a drilling contractor, we were getting quotes for MPD systems. And across the board, it was, it's these pieces are MPD. Now you need all these to be MPD. And there was no real consensus in the industry what an MPD system actually is.
Right. And I think we're starting to see more of that now, and so it'll be a good thing for the industry overall. Another example is wired drill pipe. The industry standard for data transfer is basically mud pulse telemetry. Seriously? You're going to send information on downhole data through pumping mud back up the hole? Really? Yeah. How fast is that? And wired pipe seems like a no-brainer, but there's been problems with reliability. It was always a cost. Cost, right? Yeah. Cost has been high, and supposedly some of those problems
have been for that downtime. If we're having to pull the string,
that's exactly right. But now, with driven, I think, by the need for better data, real-time data, I think we may start seeing more wired pipe.
Yeah. Before we wrap up this conversation, that's one thing I want to ask you: what technology you're most excited to see implemented in the future? And for me, it's always related to data. Oil and gas has a massive data problem And there's companies here like Google's giving a talk at SPE. I think they did yesterday. Google thinks they're going to come in and save the oil and gas industry. And I think a lot of people that are in oil and gas know that this is a very complex problem that we have, and I think that the problems are going to be solved internally by people that understand the intricacies of the industry. So I get really excited to see all the new software, just like you were talking about, getting real-time data from drilling, via wired pipe, things of that nature. Is there anything that you're really excited to see kind of mature and develop over the next several years?
Well, like I say, I'm excited to see managed pressure drilling kind of come into its own, wired pipe, and I really am interested to see what will happen with blockchain, because one of the big deals we have, because we are fractured, are contractual issues.
Yes.
And the problem is nobody trusts anyone. The contractor doesn't trust the operator to pay them for what they've done. The operator doesn't trust the contractor to do what they're being paid for, right?
Yeah.
So with a blockchain model, you can have you can overcome some of that with a system that's neutral.
Definitely, yeah. We could have another hour-long talk over blockchain.
Yeah.
You get me started on it.
I know, right?
I definitely think within the next several years, especially on the land and title side, that's where we're going to start seeing a lot of blockchain applications coming in. Obviously, we've seen Data Gumbo and Diamond Offshore releasing drilling blockchain applications. So I think that's something that we're really going to see a heavy push for. I know there's a internal forum with some of the biggest operators in Houston that meet once a month to discuss centralized blockchain applications and how they can be utilized within these E&Ps. So definitely excited to see how that comes along and matures.
We're at the cusp of some potentially great change now in a lot of areas, and digitization, machine learning. Hopefully it won't put us all out of work, but it should do good things for drilling,
We have
right?
to get over that risk aversion. I mean,
That's
nobody
right.
wants to share the information. No one wants to share the contract. No one wants to share the HSE information because it's all a liability for us. But we get over that hump, and I think.
Yeah, I think the changes that we'll see over the next decade are going to be pretty exciting, and I'm sure that
I'm looking
ATCE
forward
will
to
be
it.
very involved with that. So, guys, we got to wrap up the conversation. Mike, it was great talking to you. Enjoy you taking the time to be here.
Thanks,
with us
Colin.
today.
Patrick, I enjoyed it very much.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Right, man.
All right, good.